Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to episode 21. First off, I have a special message just a message of warning for everybody that's watching this show. Lately, at least in New Hampshire, there's been a lot of fires, and especially during the winter, and it's been raising a concern about the fire hydrants. I'm having a sinus issue right now with a bloody nose, so if I keep tapping my nose with a tissue, that would be why. Anyway, basically my message is that please consider adopting a fire hydrant. If you see that a fire hydrant has not been shoveled out, especially since we're getting 6 to 10 more inches of snow tomorrow here in New Hampshire, in the southern section anyway, so they claim, please consider adopting a fire hydrant and shoveling it for them, cleaning it off, keeping it cleaned. Because that is a big issue right now with a lot of the fires that we've had. It caused one person to lose their life a few weeks ago in Manchester, and a Hudson family lost everything they had in a fire with a similar issue. The hydrant was frozen. So please unthaw the fire hydrants by cleaning them off. The snow acts as an insulator, therefore, and since snow is cold, it's a cold insulation which freezes the water inside the hydrants. So please consider adopting a local fire hydrant. It doesn't have to be on your street. It can be one that you drive by, like if you're driving by, not going anywhere specific, and you see a fire hydrant that's still covered in snow, please stop and shovel it out, because it could be your house or someone you know's house that's on fire, and they can't get to the house because they ran out of water because the hydrant is frozen. So just a fair warning and a consideration to be nice and courteous to not only your firefighters, but to your community and helping out. Thank you for listening to that message. Next, I found a poll that Xfinity did, which is the new name for Comcast, and it's the 7 worst majors to go to college for. I thought it was interesting because I have a lot of friends that watch this show that are kind of soul-searching and not sure what they want to do. So this is something they can go off of. Some of the majors will actually surprise you, and some of them actually make sense. First off, in last place is psychology. According to the poll, those who major in psychology often end up in human services positions, teaching, or at a coffee store that has nothing to do with psychology. If you're looking to be a lecturer or want to go into research or clinical psychology, an advanced education is needed. Psychology you really can't do much with, like they said, unless you have your master's or something higher. Or obviously if you're going to become a psychologist, you'll need your PhD. History follows in number 6. A bachelor's in history has the same outcome as psychology. If you're looking to do research or lecturing, a further education is needed. History graduates can become paralegals, and many end up teaching history or working at a library of some kind. You can also find a lot of history grads working at museums, especially history museums. Number 5 is liberal arts. This degree is not meant to give you a dream job, as it's a mismatch of different topics meant to guide you to where you shine the best. The problem with liberal arts students is that many employers consider liberal arts students as those who are indecisive, which may hinder your job chances. So, for example, some employers consider if you have a bachelor's in liberal arts or an associate's in liberal arts, they may think that you don't know what you want to do with your life. They might think that you are unable to make a final decision and therefore won't qualify you for the job you're applying to. So if you do decide to go to liberal arts, make sure you take the courses with the hopes of discovering your true path in the meantime. For example, a lot of people will get their associates in liberal arts because they can transfer that to any college, and then their timing for their next whatever they want to, once they figure out what they want to do, all of those liberal arts courses can transfer over, and then they'll only need to take the classes that have to do with their major. Number 4 is anthropology. Those who major in this topic may have dreams of traveling the world to study their culture or investigate lost civilizations. And others automatically think to Bones, the guy on Bones that digs up the bones and plays with the insects and stuff. That's not really what's going to happen if you get a simple degree in anthropology. In real life, those with this degree usually end up as office managers or customer service, not even close to their goal. because it's a dead subject, let's face it. I mean, anthropology, not a lot of people go to school for that. Number 3 is drama and theater arts. This came in at number 3 because it's in the entertainment sector, which is categorized as a hit or miss category, where your connections and past experiences matter. Many end up working as administrative assistants or in customer service until they hopefully get their big break. You don't see a lot of people that graduate right from college and automatically get a leading role in a movie. It just usually doesn't happen unless they have connections or they're sluts, either way. But you know what I mean. And number 2 is my field, criminal justice. Although those who choose this major often do find work within their field, they are still considered underemployed because you don't actually need a 4-year degree to work in this field. Sometimes not even a 2-year degree. Jobs in this field include police officers, paralegals, and security guards. Police officers, you don't even really need a degree. All you need is a high school diploma or a GED, and basically you just take the test and you take the academy training. So that's why criminal justice is considered underpaid, underemployed, is because you work for 4 years or 2 years to get a degree when you could really just go in and become a police officer, and there you go. And in the number 1 spot is business administration and management. A bachelor's in business administration management may give you a foot in the door with careers within this category or help you start your own business, but if you really want to go far in this field, a master's will help greatly. Now moving on to TV news. NBC gives another show the axe. Sean Saves the World has officially been canceled due to poor ratings. It's been a tough year for NBC in the area of new sitcoms, as many of them have not lasted, and some still continue to barely get by. Fox show gets renewed for double-digit season. Finally, good news in the TV world. Fox has renewed Bones for its 10th season. The Bones team announced Thursday night via their Facebook page that the station has picked them up for another season. As much as I love the show, they must be running out of cases by now. Still, I'm excited and happy that Bones was renewed, as it's one of the few crime shows that is actually good and informative. Next, as I promised, since I paid attention this week, I have a cold case section. And this week's cold case spotlight is on the city of Jacksonville, Alabama. The sheriff's office is asking for your help in the investigation of the death of Louis Villanueva that occurred on December 20th, 2007. The shooting occurred at the Parkway Villa Apartments during the evening. The persons of interest are 3 black males wearing dark clothing, short in height and average in weight. Please call Crime Stoppers with any information at 254-7777. More information is as follows. On December 20th, 2007, Mr. Villanueva was outside the Parkway Villa Apartments in Center Point. 3 black males, all dressed in black clothing, were observed approaching Mr. Villanueva when the shooting occurred. All 3 fled the scene. Mr. Villanueva sustained a fatal gunshot injury. Louis Villanueva's family and friends continue to hope that someone with information about his death will come forward. That the shooters began firing guns in the middle of a heavily populated apartment complex without any regard for the lives or safety of other residents and their families also raises concerns for the safety of everyone who comes into contact with them. If you have information about the death of Louis Villanueva, contact Lieutenant Don Edge, Jefferson County Sheriff's Office at 205-325-5670. If you want to remain anonymous, you can call Crime Stoppers at 205-254-7777. If your anonymous tip leads to the identification and charging of the persons responsible for this crime, you will be eligible for a cash reward. I don't expect any of my any of my watchers to know anything about these particular cases because they're not from Alabama. But I'm still highlighting a different state each week just because once I put it on YouTube, I never know who clicks on watch. Somebody from Alabama could be watching the show randomly and just know something. So that's why I'm spotlighting each state, one state a week, and just kind of figuring it out as we go along. Reflection Corner this week. Our first reading, or our only reading really, comes from 2 Samuel chapter 18, verses 9 through 10, 14, 24, 25, 30, and 19, 3. And Absalom chanced to meet the servants of David. Absalom was riding upon his mule, and the mule went under the thick branches of a great oak, and his head caught fast in the oak, and he was left hanging between heaven and earth, while the mule that was under him went on. And a certain man saw it, and told Joab, Behold, I saw Absalom hanging in an oak. Joab said, I will not waste time like this with you. And he took 3 darts in his hand, and thrust them into the heart of Absalom, while he was still alive in the oak. Now David was sitting between the 2 gates, and the watchman went up to the roof of the gate by the wall. And when he lifted up his eyes and looked, he saw a man running alone. And the watchman called out and told the king, and the king said, If he is alone, there are tidings in his mouth. And he came apace and drew near. And the king said, Turn aside and stand here. So he turned aside and stood still. And behold, the Cushite came, and the Cushite said, Good tidings for my lord the king. For the Lord has delivered you this day from the power of all who rose up against you. The king said to the Cushite, Is it well with the young man Absalom? And the Cushite answered, May the enemies of my lord the king, and all who rise up against you for evil, be like that young man. And the king was deeply moved, and went up to the chamber over the gate, and wept. And as he went, he said, O my son Absalom, my son, Absalom, would I had died instead of you, O Absalom, my son, my son. And the people stole into the city that day, as people steal in who are ashamed when they flee in battle. Our psalm this week is Psalm 86, verses 1 through 6. Lord, you are good and forgiving. Incline your ear, O Lord, and answer me, for I am poor and needy. Preserve my life, for I am godly. Save your servant who trusts in you, for you are my God. Lord, you are good and forgiving. Be gracious to me, O Lord, for to you do I cry all the day. Gladden the soul of your servant, for to you, O Lord, do I lift up my soul. Lord, you are good and forgiving. For you, O Lord, are good and forgiving, abounding in steadfast love to all who call on you. Give ear, O Lord, to my prayer. Hearken to my cry of supplication. Lord, you are good and forgiving. And our gospel today is Mark chapter 5, verses 21 to 43, one of my personal favorites. And when Jesus had crossed again in the boat to the other side, a great crowd gathered about him, and he was beside the sea. Then came one of the rulers of the synagogue, Jairus by name, and seeing him, he fell at his feet and besought him, saying, My little daughter is at the point of death. Come and lay your hands on her, so that she may be made well and live. And he went with him. And a great crowd followed him and thronged about him. And there was a woman who had had a flow of blood for 12 years, and who had suffered much under many physicians, and had spent all that she had, and was no better, but rather grew worse. She had heard the reports about Jesus, and came up behind him in the crowd, and touched his garment. For she said, If I even touch his garments, I shall be made well. And immediately the hemorrhage ceased, and she felt in her body that she was healed of her disease. And Jesus, perceiving in himself that power had gone forth from him, immediately turned about in the crowd and said, "Who touched my garments?" And his disciples said to him, "You see the crowd pressing around you, and yet you say, 'Who touched me?'" And he looked around to see who had done it. But the woman, knowing what had been done to her, came in fear and trembling and fell down before him and told him the whole truth. And he said to her, "Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace and be healed of your disease." While he was still speaking, there came from the ruler's house some who said, "Your daughter is dead. Why trouble the teacher any further?" But ignoring what they said, Jesus said to the ruler of the synagogue, "Do not fear, only believe." And he allowed no one to follow him except Peter and James and John, the brother of James. When they came to the house of the ruler of the synagogue, he saw a tumult, and people weeping and wailing loudly. And when he had entered, he said to them, "Why do you make a tumult and weep? The child is not dead, but sleeping." And they laughed at him. But he put them all outside, and took the child's father and mother and those who were with him, and went in where the child was. Taking her by the hand, he said to her, "Talitha cumi," which means, "Little girl, I say to you, arise." And immediately the girl got up and walked. She was 12 years of age. And they were immediately overcome with amazement. And he strictly charged them that no one should know this, and told them to give her something to eat. The reason I like this so much is A, because it hits home right now, because my friend Amy, the lovely, the talented Amy Covino, is having some health scares with doctors and testing and stuff. So she's been on my mind a lot, and then this was today's gospel. And I believe she watches my show when she has the time, so hopefully she chooses to watch this week's show. Because as I was praying the other night for her, I got this scripture, not realizing that it was today's gospel. But this actual scripture passage came to me, and, I immediately texted her and said, I'm reading a scripture that I got for you, and it's about healing. And so just rally prayers for her. She has testing this month to find out exactly what's going on. I really do feel, though, that whatever it is not anything major, but we'll see. It's also my favorite because it's something that anybody can relate to as far as healing goes. We shouldn't be afraid to touch his garments, and that's what adoration does for us in communion as Catholics. First, going to Mass and receiving communion, and then adoration is another place where we can get healed, just as the woman did in the story and the little girl. I love adoration for that one reason. It's where I feel like I can go and sit and just tell him whatever's on my mind. If my energy is down, if I don't feel good, or if my mom's having problems, I can just go there and just touch his garment. Just sit there and pray. And I usually feel better, and something usually happens once I leave adoration. And a lot of people have issues with adoration because they say that not every church has adoration, or not every church has adoration when they can get to one. Manchester has one 24 hours, 7 days a week, with the exception of some snowstorms, adoration chapel at St. Marie's. Granted, it's not very attractive. It's tiny, very tiny. I think it only has like 8 or 9 seats in it. But it's still there for you to use. And Blessed Sacrament has one from 7 to 7. Much more spacious and much more eye-appealing for those of you that feel the need to have something attractive about where you're praying. Also, most churches have at least one day out of the week where there's adoration from a certain time to a certain time. It may be the first Friday. At my church, St. Raphael's, is the first Friday from right after the 6 o'clock Mass, so like 6:30 to 8:30 or something like that. And they have a series of spoken prayers that they say as a group, and then it's quiet time. But there's just look into your local church. There's many options. If you're new to the faith or you're not Catholic but you want to learn more about adoration, feel free to message me privately and I'll answer it, or, you know, stay tuned for the summer, because the spring and summer I plan on revamping my Catholic spirituality investigation series that I do every summer. Especially since I'm taking the summer off from school, I'll actually have time to devote to it, to make it a very fun course. So, and that's available both in person through me, like we meet here at my house, or we meet outside, or we meet at the cemetery, depending on the week, or as an online class where I would email you whatever we covered, and we would discuss it either through Skype or through Facebook chat or something like that. If any of you know of any websites where you can, it's like a free chat site where people can log in for free and all meet up in the chat room, let me know, because that would be a perfect setup for my online class, to have people come on a certain time and chat along with us, or even a video site that can connect more than one person with a webcam, like, so that way it could be on the same time as my live class, and you guys could be with us from your own house. So any tips on that section would be greatly appreciated, as I would love to expand my abilities with this class this year. On to the saints of the day. There are 3 today, and the first one is Saint John de Brito. Saint John de Brito was a martyr from Lisbon, Portugal. Saint John de Brito was born on March 1st, 1647 in Lisbon. He came from an aristocratic family and was expected to pursue a court career, since he spent his childhood and early youth as a page at the royal court. When he was 15, however, he entered a Jesuit monastery. Before that, he was severely ill, and his healing was attributed to St. Francis Xavier from the Society of Jesus, the great missionary of India. De Brito decided to imitate him. John was ordained in 1673, and shortly afterwards, despite his mother's protest, he went to India. He landed at the port of Goa, where St. Francis Xavier's grave can be found. There, he was preparing for a mission in a more distant place. Upon arrival, he fell severely ill again. In the years 1674 through 1686, John de Brito worked in different missionary centers in southeastern Asia. Later, he traveled to the kingdom of Morava, which was closed to Christians. He was a very successful missionary, which raised local authorities' concern. Arrested and threatened with death, he was called back to Europe to perform works related to the missions. After 3 years, he returned to India to continue his mission in Morava. There, he was harassed by royal officials, who watched him closely. The ruler of the kingdom was most enraged by the fact that the missionary had baptized a local aristocrat. John de Brito was arrested and executed on February 4th, 1693 in the locality of Oreor. He was canonized on June 22nd, 1947. In his footsteps. 15-year-old John de Brito chose his life path. He decided to preach the gospel among people in India. He was not discouraged by the poor health conditions, unfavorable climate, and hostility of local authorities. He converted people with persistence. 300 years later, a young Loreto nun, Agnes Ganga Bohaxiu, left her order also to go to India. She helped the poorest people from the lowest caste, the untouchables, those to whom only God reached out to, because other people would not. She founded the Congregation of the Missionaries of Charity. She owes her name, that most people know her by, Mother Teresa of Calcutta, to founding a center for lepers in that city in 1961. Mother Teresa did not avoid any of the plagues affecting humanity, such as leprosy in the 1960s and HIV/AIDS in the 1980s. She created the world's first center for AIDS patients in Greenwich, Vegan, in 1985. Her thoughts are gathered in the book A Simple Path. Next, we have Saint Joan of France. This is not the same as Joan of Arc. Joan of France is the foundress of the Annocades of Bourges. Also known as Jane of Valois, Joan was born to French royalty, the daughter of King Louis XI and Charlotte of Savoy. It is believed that Joan was physically challenged at birth, and because of this, she was rejected by her father. When she was just 8 years old, Joan was married to her father's cousin Louis, who was the Duke of Orleans, probably for political reasons. Louis, too, treated the young girl harshly and showed her little respect. After her father died, Joan's brother was crowned king. But a few years later, Joan's husband rebelled against the king in an effort to take the throne for himself, and Joan's brother ordered Louis executed. Joan pleaded with her brother to spare her husband. Even though he relented, Joan's problems did not end there. Over the years, Joan had grown to care for her husband, despite the fact that he continued to treat her cruelly. After Louis finally became king in 1498, he appealed to the Pope to have their marriage annulled, and the Pope consented. Because Joan had not objected, Louis gave Joan numerous properties, including the Duchy of Berry. Joan moved to Bourges and devoted her life to God. Her days became filled with prayer and charitable acts. Her confessor, a Franciscan friar, helped Joan found an order for women. At first, they had only 11 girls, but eventually their rule was approved by the Pope, and the order was called the Annocades of Bourges. On the Feast of the Pentecost in 1504, Joan made her profession. On that day, she also renounced her name, her title, and gave away all her possessions. Finally at peace, Joan died less than 1 year later. Joan's childhood could not have been a very happy one, despite her privileged background. Unfortunately, even in our modern world, countless children are suffering and lonely. One organization that is trying to bring a little comfort to thousands of children is Angel Wish and Company. Founded by Shimi Mehta, Angel Wish strives to bring a little love to children touched by HIV/AIDS by offering the public the opportunity to grant a child's wish through the internet. In the United States alone, it is estimated that 10,000 children are infected with HIV/AIDS, and 65,000 children are affected by the disease. Either one or both of their parents are infected. Angel Wish carefully protects the identities of the children. They work through hospitals and HIV/AIDS care centers, which often have a large number of pediatric patients, and also offers psychological and social services to the children of patients. If you wish to help make a child's wish come true, go to www.angelwish.org. Our last saint today is Saint Aventinus of Troyes. Saint Aventinus was a hermit born in Troyes, France. Saint Aventinus was one of the 3 men bearing that name who lived in the 5th century near Troyes. The other was a martyr venerated in Turin, and the third was a bishop of Chartres who lived some 100 years later. Troyes is a city east of Paris. From the middle of the 4th century, it was the seat of a bishopric, which is like an election year for bishops, and that's where the election took place. And in the years 426 through 478, Saint Lupus, born in the year 383, was the bishop. The writings of Saint Gregory of Tours mention that he was friends with Saint Aventinus. This is how we can determine the dates and life of this rather mysterious man. In the area where Saint Aventinus lived, the Frankish state emerged in the 5th century. The Frankish tribes had lived in Gaul in the 4th century, but started to build a state only after the collapse of the Western Roman Empire in 476. Most likely, Saint Aventinus lived in a time of great chaos resulting from the weakened Roman power and a lack of an organized state for the new peoples in Europe. Another hint for determining facts about Saint Aventinus' life is his name. It comes from the name of one of the 7 hills in Rome, the Aventine. The name was used in and around Italy since ancient times. It is difficult to say whether Saint Aventius was of Roman origin, but he probably had contact with Roman culture and was not a barbarian newly arrived in Europe. He was most likely a member of the people living in that area for ages. Aventius was a priest and administrator of an unknown diocese, possibly Troyes, but he resigned from his office and took up a hermit's life. There are some speculations that a community formed around him and that he led it. He gave up a church career in order to lay the foundations of spiritual life for the new Europe. In his footsteps, we know little about Saint Aventius except that he gave up his church career and became a hermit. The decision to choose such a path of life often raises questions and doubts in us. We might ask, is it possible to do good in seclusion? Should a cleric meet people and their problems, or should he focus on contemplation? Since true communion with God is only possible in the peace and quiet of a hermitage. Is a hermit's life proof of one's egoism, an escape from the duties of spiritual life, or is it a sacrifice? It seems it is unimportant which path we choose, as long as we are convinced it is the right decision. After all, Aventius gathered a community around him that he led and that built the foundations of the church in times of chaos. Perhaps he would be less successful as a bishop without a deep commitment than as a hermit implementing the mission of building a Christian community. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that, on the beginning questions of this saint. What do you think about hermitage? Do you think that it's a good thing? Do you think that we should be more contemplative? Or do you think that being a contemplative is pretty much being useless and lazy? And I'm not talking about being contemplative meaning let's shut the TV off and not watch any of today's TV, though I would agree that it's getting pretty bad. But I'm talking like in a spiritual sense. Do you think that it would be better for like a severely Catholic, I don't want to say severely Catholic, but a very piously Catholic person to just lock himself or herself up in a secluded area and not come out for months upon months? Or do you think that they should live a normal life, just make sure that their faith is a prerogative? Love to hear your comments. I'd love to get this group talking a little bit more, because I feel like I'm one-sided a lot when I do this show. I'm asking you guys questions and nobody's responding to them, minus the fan of the week questions. So just a quick comment or even a private message to me on Facebook or something would be fine. I'd love to hear your thoughts on the questions that I'm asking in the shows. Our closing prayer for today is based off of Saint Joan of France and her line of work. Almighty Father, help us to find a way to bring hope to our world's children. There are so many who are hurt and suffering. Open our eyes and hearts so that we always remember them. Through our prayers, small gestures, or volunteering our time. With so little effort, we can make a difference in their lives. We pray this in your precious Son's name. Amen. This week's fan of the week is once again my sister, since I goofed and forgot to post a question last week. I opened this question up to anybody, and she was the first to answer. The answer to the question was Michael J. Fox. This week's question will be under a new category, as it'll be a new month. I will post the question later tonight for those of you who wish to attempt to be fan of the week. I will see you next week.